fellow gardeners. If you've been following me for a while, you all know that I share a garden guide each month full of things that can be planted or started from seed. This month's guide is huge. There are so many types of crops that can be planted now that cool season has arrived. I have 30 delicious veggie and other plant ideas for you that need to be planted right now. This is probably one of the biggest months for gardening. If you're new here, hello and welcome. My name is Jara. I've been gardening all of my life and I'm a professional seed and plant nursery. I love to share my knowledge and teach others how to garden and grow food. So you've come to the right place if you want to improve your gardening skills. Before we get into all the things that you can plant this month, I just want to share 2 free resources that will help keep you and your garden on track. The first is my free printable PDF checklist with all of the crops that need to be started from seed or transplanted in October. To get it, please follow the link in the description and I'll email it to you. Or if you're already part of my email group, I send the checklist with the monthly garden guide automatically at the beginning of each month. And the second resource is next week's video that goes live on my channel Friday, October 4th. It is all about the garden tasks that should be completed in October. These resources are designed to help keep your garden on track month to month. Now let's get into the 30 crops that you can plant or start from seed right now in October. The first crop idea that I'm very excited about is broccoli. Broccoli is one of our favorite veggies to eat, so I plant a lot of broccoli starting in October. If you're located in a warm winter climate like me, we have a very small window to grow broccoli before it's just too hot. Once it gets too hot, they bolt instead of forming a nice head of broccoli. October is when I start transplanting them into the garden. And I stress transplant. You should not just be starting them from seed. I started mine from seed 2 months ago, so now they're a huge transplant size. They take 3-ish months from transplanting to start producing. There is an exception though. If you want to hurry up and grow some broccoli, you can direct sow seeds for Piracicaba Brazilian sprouting broccoli because it is very heat tolerant, meaning you'll get a harvest in before it's just too hot for it to handle. I have seeds for Piracicaba on my website along with many seeds and plants for the majority of the things that I'm about to mention in this guide. I absolutely love Piracicaba so much that I made a whole YouTube video dedicated to it, and I have a video all about growing broccoli and probably the majority of the crops I'm mentioning in this guide. So if one exists, I'll just link all of that below in the description so you all can easily find them. Continuing with a unique relative of broccoli, and that's kohlrabi. This is technically not a root crop because it forms a edible bulb above the ground, but it does not like having its root system disturbed, so ideally you want to direct sow seeds for kohlrabi into the soil. Kohlrabi is a very underrated veggie. It has a great crisp flavor, kind of like if a potato and a cabbage had a baby. It's much easier to grow than heading types of brassicas like broccoli too. So I challenge you to try growing it if you have not done so already. Next up, we have lettuce. It's so hot here in Florida that I can only grow lettuce during the fall and winter, which is a bummer because I eat a lot of salads. So I really go all out with direct sowing seeds for all sorts of lettuces starting in October, with the last sowing being in February. If I had to recommend a couple cultivars, because there are so many to choose from, I would say go for the intense dark colored varieties like Super Red Romaine or Lolo Rosso. The more color it has, the more nutrients. I also really like loose leaf types of lettuces, meaning they don't form a head of lettuce, because you can harvest individual leaves as needed and it just keeps growing more. And this is as opposed to harvesting a huge head of lettuce at one time and now that plant is done. One of my favorite loose leaf lettuces is black seeded Simpson. The leaves are very broad and buttery soft. If you're in a hot climate, you will have more success growing romaine types of lettuces. The leaves are more stiff and handle the heat better in my opinion. So yeah, go crazy and direct sow seeds for lettuces right now in October. Everyone is asking me if it's too late to plant tomatoes, and the answer to that is yes, it's too late. Except for you zone 11 and up people that barely get any kind of frost or winter. You can continue to transplant tomatoes during this month of October. I transplanted my tomatoes at the very end of August and many of them are already forming fruit. So cross my fingers I don't get hit by a hurricane, because October is one of the most active months for hurricanes, and then my tomatoes will be just fine. I'll be harvesting tomatoes while the majority of the country is under snow. That's why I love Florida so much. But I do have an exception, and that's to try growing some microdwarf tomatoes indoors. I have a few microdwarf tomato seeds on my website and I'm slowly growing out new varieties to add more. So more to come. But microdwarf tomatoes start producing at around 45 days from seed. The plants usually stay under 1 foot tall at maturity, so they can easily be grown in a 1 gallon size pot or container and grown indoors in a bright windowsill, or give it some extra light with grow lights or shop lights. Moving along, we have some more leafy greens. A lot of leafy greens are cool season crops, so we have a lot of options this month when it comes to greens. One of my favorites is TATSOI. This leafy green is a near perfect substitute for spinach. It looks like spinach, chops and cooks like spinach, but it doesn't have a strong spinach flavor. It is still delicious on its own. You might be asking, why am I growing something to substitute for spinach? Well, spinach hates warm temperatures. I have to get the timing perfect to grow it. It can't be too hot and it can't be too cold. Hot climate gardeners don't really have consistent, moderate temperatures to make spinach happy. One day it's cool and the next it's back up in the 80s. And this is during my winter. Spinach really struggles with those kinds of temperature swings. So if you don't want to deal with all of that and guarantee some sort of spinachy success, try growing TATSOI instead. I just direct sow TATSOI seeds around the garden. There is the traditional green TATSOI and some really cool red or purple colored varieties that are just stunning to grow. Speaking of spinach though, if you're zones 8 and below, go ahead and direct sow seeds for spinach right now in October. Zones 9 and up, I recommend that you wait for things to cool down just a little bit more, so direct sow seeds next month in November. That's the only time that I have been successful growing spinach. My favorite so far has been Bloomsdale long-standing spinach. It just seems to hold up to the heat better than the others. October is the beginning of garlic planting season. Those of you in zone 7 and below need to start planting seed garlic right now. If you're in zones 8 and above, you need to order your seed garlic and start vernalizing them. That means you place the seed garlic in the fridge for a few weeks so it thinks it went through a winter period. I put my seed garlic in the fridge now with intent to plant in December. Next up, we have an idea for zone 11 and up gardeners only, and that's peppers and eggplants. You guys can transplant them. You barely have a winter, so they won't die on you. Everyone else, plan on sowing seeds for peppers and eggplants indoors 3 months before your last spring frost date. October is a great month to direct sow seeds for bok choy. I feel like this is an overlooked crop in the United States. It's used all over in Asian cuisines, and it's so easy to grow. Literally, you're harvesting heads of bok choy anywhere between 40-ish days if you're growing a mini variety to around 55 or 60 days for the standard size varieties. You can fit so many succession sowings of bok choy in just one season. I find they grow best fall, winter, and spring. My favorite variety is Canton bok choy. It has white stems that are juicy and have a nice crisp to them. Up next, we have beans. If you're in garden zones 10B and up, go ahead and direct sow beans in October. I would say October is the last month to get some in, actually. Then you will have to wait for spring to plant some more. I recommend the early maturing types like Provider, which is the quickest seed to harvestable bean pods variety that I have ever grown. So that's a really good one. I have this whole green stock garden tower full of Provider green beans and will be harvesting very soon. If you still have a solid 4 months before your first winter frost date, you can easily direct sow seeds for southern peas, black-eyed peas, or cowpeas. That's going to be those of you with first winter frost dates in January. They start producing in about 2.5 months and continue producing over the course of several weeks. I get asked almost every day, when will it be time to plant strawberries? Well, if you're in zones 9, you can start planting strawberry crowns right now in October. Zones 10 and up need to wait until next month. It is too late to start them from seed. You need to be planting crowns. And there are lots of different varieties. You have June bearing, ever bearing, day neutral, and a few more. This does matter, so do your research to figure out what type of strawberry will grow best in your state. I have a how to plant strawberries guide that breaks down all of this information, which I will link below. Last year, I acquired lots of strawberry bare roots straight from a Florida strawberry farm that sells wholesale. So that means it's really good stuff. They were the biggest and healthiest strawberry crowns I have ever seen. I don't know yet if I will be able to get some this year, so stay tuned. I will be sending an alert to my email group if I do get some. There is a link in the description if you want to join my email group. October is a great time to either direct sow seeds or transplant mustard greens. These plants get huge and provide lots of greens over the course of several weeks. My favorite is Florida broadleaf mustard greens because these leaves are giant and have a nice peppery flavor. Harvest the leaves when they are small and tender for a more mild peppery flavor. Similar to mustard greens, October is when I start direct sowing seeds or transplanting collard greens. These plants also get very big and produce giant sized leaves. They don't have a strong peppery flavor like mustard greens though. Instead, it has a savory kale type of flavor. My absolute favorite collard green is kind of a rare variety called Alabama Blue. The leaves are buttery soft when cooked in a soup, just really delicious. October is time to plant potatoes if you are in zone 8. Zones 9 and up need to wait until November. But with that said, it is time to order your seed potatoes. I recommend you purchase your seed potatoes from local nurseries so you get the varieties that perform best in your state. It is kind of hard to find seed potato this time of year because the rest of the country plants their potatoes in spring, not fall, like zones 8 and up. So there are not many companies that sell seed potatoes this time of year. Just do a Google search for seed potatoes. You will find a lot of good companies. Make sure they are certified disease-free so you don't introduce diseases into your garden. Next, let's talk about squash. At this point, I only recommend zones 11 and up to direct sow seeds for quick maturing summer squash varieties that produce a harvest at around 50 to 60 days. I recommend early white patty pan squash and gray zucchini. The disease and pest pressure will be significantly lower if you grow them now instead of growing them during the spring and summer. And just like the squash, I only recommend that zones 11 and up direct sow or transplant early maturing cucumber varieties right now in October. Focus on these smaller sized cucumbers because they will be ready for harvest faster than the larger market or fresh eating types of cucumbers. Some examples include Parisian gherkin or miniature white cucumbers. Everyone else, it's best to sow cucumber seeds indoors about 6 to 8 weeks before your last spring frost day if you want to get an early start on your spring cucumber season. October is when I start planting one of my absolute favorite crops, and that's onions. You can also plant other members of the allium family like leeks and chives. Onions are sold as seeds, transplants, or sets. In my experience, growing my own from seed or purchasing transplants has given me the best results. This year I started all of mine from seed way back in August because they take a solid 2 to 3 months to be ready. They are now ready to pull apart and transplant. It is too late to start them from seed right now, so buy transplants instead. When shopping for onions, you will notice they are labeled as short day, long day, and intermediate day. Make sure you choose the correct kind for your state. Just Google short day onion maps to look at a map of the United States and figure out what kind you should be growing in your garden. If you're located in the southern parts of the United States, zones 8 and up, you're probably going to be growing these short day onion varieties like me. Leeks are either started from seed or you can purchase transplants, and chives are just very easily just started from seed. Just direct sow them around the garden. I'm zone 10A and I start planting onions in October, with December being the last time I put some into the ground. And I'm just gonna lump the next category together, and that's all sorts of Asian greens. October is a perfect time to direct sow seeds for all sorts of Asian greens like mizuna, chimjimasai, komatsuna, and shisho. These greens are so easy to start from seed. I like to find bare spots in my garden and rake in some blood meal into the soil before I direct sow the seeds. Anything that is grown to just eat its green leaves basically just needs a lot of nitrogen. Blood meal is an organic source of nitrogen, and I feel it helps produce lush and vibrant colored leafy greens. So work some into the soil before direct sowing your seeds. Then keep the soil moist and you should see quick germination in about 3 to 5 days. Moving along, we have cauliflower. Cauliflower is a member of the brassicas family like broccoli and Brussels sprouts. October is a great time to transplant them into the garden. It is a little bit harder to grow than broccoli and is more sensitive to temperature swings from cold to hot. So planting them at the right time is key. I have grown so many different varieties of cauliflower over the years. For a standard white cauliflower, I really like Snowball. However, my absolute favorite of all time is an heirloom purple cauliflower called Violetta Italia. I have a theory that darker colored versions of veggies tolerate the heat much better, and this purple cauliflower definitely does better than the white ones that I try to grow. I always get huge, almost basketball-sized heads when I grow Violetta Italia. It is one you don't want to grow without. Some other types of greens that can be direct sown in October include members of the chicory family like radicchio and endive. There are a few different varieties of endive to choose from. My personal favorite is the frilly leaved version called endive frisée. I love to thinly slice the leaves and then add it into salads that have a sweet component. The bitterness of the endive with sweet ingredients like apples, honey, and dried cranberries is a nice flavor contrast. Radicchio is a bitter leafy green known for its bright magenta and white leaves that look fantastic in salads. When bitter greens like radicchio are cooked or exposed to heat, their bitterness mellows out a little bit, so it can be used as both raw or cooked. It might look like a small head of red cabbage. In fact, the plants have a cabbage-like formation with large flat leaves surrounding a central head, but it's very different and is a chicory, which is part of the daisy family instead of the brassicas family like cabbages and broccoli. Both radicchio and endive are easy to grow, just direct sow seeds around the garden. Up next, we have carrots. October is the first month of my fall season where I can start direct sowing seeds for all sorts of carrots. I sow my last succession sowing of carrots in December. So if you're in a warm winter climate like zones 9 and up, we have a pretty big window to get carrots planted into the ground. I say that December is the last chance because I typically harvest carrots 4 months after direct sowing the seeds. This will land me in March when it starts to get really hot again. If carrots are exposed to high heat, they get stunted, meaning they stop growing, and they develop a gross bitter flavor. So the goal is to harvest them all out before the heat returns. A lot of people struggle to grow carrots, but once you get the hang of it and understand a few key requirements, it's super easy and fun to grow. I have a grow guide that will take you through each step, which I will link in the description. Okay, moving along, we have kale. During the month of October, I like to either transplant or direct sow seeds for kale. You should start harvesting baby kale leaves in about 55 to 70 days, depending on the variety. So it doesn't take too long, and kale plants live for many, many months, so you'll get a lot of greens from just one plant. If you eat a lot of kale and want to preserve leaves via freezing to add to smoothies or soups, I recommend you grow 5 kale plants per person in your household. There are a lot of unique varieties of kale to choose from. My absolute favorite kale is any of the lacinato, Tuscan types of kales, also called dinosaur kale, or the curly-leaved kind like Vate's Blue Scotch curly leaf kale because they hold up to the heat the best. I usually start harvesting kale in December, with the last time being May, when it finally just gets too hot for them. However, I have had some tough lacinato kale plants survive over 2 years when planted in a spot that gets some afternoon shade. Next, let's talk about cabbage. Cabbage is part of the brassicas family like broccoli and cauliflower. I like to transplant cabbage in October, not just start them from seed. You have to transplant. Warm winter climates have a very small window to grow cabbage to maturity. It is easier to grow the Napa type of cabbages because they mature faster. One of my favorite varieties of Napa cabbage is called Kogani. I love to steam Napa cabbage with some ginger or add it to soups. Regular large heading cabbages are a little more challenging to grow, but if grown successfully, they keep for many months in a cellar or dry, dark, cool pantry. If you struggle to grow cabbage, I recommend an early maturing variety. There are some that mature in less than 75 days. If you have a long cool season or winter, then grow the standard large heading cabbages that take over 80 days to mature. They tolerate a lot of cold and survive even in tough winter areas. I have successfully grown these large heading types of cabbages like Savoy Perfection, for example, or Mammoth Red Rock, but it's just a little bit tricky. I have to be on point with transplanting them into the ground in October and hope I have a normal winter that year. Sometimes we have an abnormally warm winter, which causes my heads of cabbage to bolt before they are ready to harvest. But when the conditions align and it works out, it's awesome. Fresh, homegrown cabbage is so delicious. If you're in zones 9 and up, it is safe to plant root crops like ginger, turmeric, and galangal during the month of October. Your ground does not freeze, so these plants will survive the winter. I like to grow them in containers or grow bags because they easily spread via underground rhizomes. If you're gardening in an area that gets snow or your ground freezes, then grow them in a pot and bring it indoors once temperatures begin to fall below around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Or you can dig up the rhizomes before your first winter frost arrives to then replant them in spring once all danger of frost has passed. They are very ornamental with broad tropical foliage, so treat it like a house plant if you bring them inside. I have plants for all of these on my website. If you are in zones 9 and up, you still have time to plant fruiting trees and plants in October so they get a little established before winter arrives. I highly recommend you visit a local nursery to select the best varieties of fruit trees that will perform well in your area. Don't go to big box stores. They only carry common varieties grown all over the United States, not the specific varieties that were bred to grow well in your state. Perennial fruiting trees and plants are an essential component to my garden and help me get closer to my goals of growing all of my own household's food needs. They don't require as much care as annual veggie crops and produce a ton of fruit once the tree hits maturity. I also recommend you choose self-fertile varieties because they won't require another tree to cross-pollinate with. That means you only need one self-fertile tree in your yard or garden to get fruit. So very handy to maximize the variety of fruit you can grow in a small garden. Next up, I have a few root crop ideas for you. October is when I start direct sowing seeds for beets. I feel like beets are such an underutilized veggie. Not enough people grow and eat them. They are extremely nutritious, have a lot of iron among other things, and I love juicing beets. I will have to make a video recipe showing you guys how I do it. But beet juice mixed with watermelon juice or orange juice is so delicious. My 7-year-old son, who is a super picky eater, even asks to drink some sometimes. It also has a good amount of fiber, so I like to add a few chunks into my smoothies. If you have any beet recipes that are so delicious, even picky eaters like it, please comment below and share. I would appreciate the ideas as I try to incorporate more beets into my diet. Beets are a root vegetable, but they also produce delicious leafy greens too, so the entire plant is edible. On to another root crop, and that's radish. I like to direct sow seeds for radish starting in the month of October, with February being the last time I will succession sow more. They grow best during the cooler months. The number one issue I see other gardeners ask when growing radish is, why are they so small at the 30-day mark? Maturity dates on seed packets are an estimate when a particular crop is grown in ideal conditions. As backyard home gardeners, you're probably not growing in perfect ideal conditions. So just give them more time, they will eventually size up. If exposed to heat, they get stunted, so the goal is to grow and harvest them out before it gets too hot. And my last root crop recommendations are turnips and rutabaga. October is a great time to start direct sowing seeds for both turnips and rutabaga. These root crops are part of the brassicas family like cabbage and broccoli, but they are in different groups as they are not the same. Typically, turnips are white with purple shoulders. Turnips have a peppery flavor, kind of like a radish, but more mild. Rutabagas grow a bigger root in comparison to a turnip and come in a variety of colors from white, brown, purple, yellow, and white. Rutabagas taste more like a not so sweet carrot or a mild cabbage version of a turnip. Both of these root crops store for a very long period of time and are fantastic when roasted or added into soups. Okay guys, we We have arrived at the last recommendation for planting this month, and that's Swiss chard. October is finally cool enough to start direct sowing seeds or transplanting Swiss chard. There are a few different varieties of Swiss chard, but my favorite is Bright Light or Rainbow Swiss chard because of its bright neon colored stems. I like to harvest the leaves while they are still small and add them to my salads. Leaves that get bigger are better used for cooking applications like adding to a soup. Swiss chard is one of the last leafy greens to finally give out when the heat returns to my garden, so it has a decent heat tolerance. The same plants will grow and produce over the course of many months, giving me several harvests. So if you're looking for a decent heat tolerant green that will produce a lot, I can't recommend Swiss chard enough. This garden guide for October was huge, and I'm so glad you made it to the end. This is the same stuff that I'm doing or planting right now in my own garden. So I hope you guys get to it and plant as much as possible because it will guarantee a huge harvest this fall and winter. If you enjoyed this video, a big thumbs up would mean a lot to me and helps out my channel more than you know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you know right away when I post new videos. I recommend you watch my how to grow broccoli tutorial next, since that is a major veggie crop to plant this month, for more gardening guidance. Thanks for watching and happy gardening.